Thank you very much for inviting me to this, and thanks everyone for the amazing stories and presentations. They're very inspiring. I'll just share my screen. I've got some slides. I'm very much like a narrative kind of person. I like telling stories, and can you guys see that? Awesome. Yeah, I think storytelling is kind of how I came to be in data science. So yeah, I'll just start on my story and then we'll get to data science in the end. So why am I showing you pictures of New Scientist and National Geographic covers? When I was in high school, I wasn't that keen on maths and data science and that kind of thing. I knew I had to do it, but it didn't really excite me. What really excited me was, however, reading kind of popular science journals. So I was obsessed with like National Geographic, New Scientist. I would read them cover to cover, buy them whenever I could. I just loved how these journals kind of connected the world of science and research to my own world, and just kind of inspired this like fascination with the world. But also how they brought to light kind of really important issues. So like climate change, conservation issues, that kind of thing. So at the end of high school, I decided I wanted to be a science journalist. And so I was like, well, I better do a science degree. And I happened to get very good grades in chemistry. So I decided to do a chemistry degree. During this chemistry degree, I found being in a lab very challenging. Just all the hours in the lab just didn't really suit me. But while I was doing my degree, one of my lecturers suggested that I try doing some maths because it's very important for understanding chemistry. And I was like, oh, I don't know, I'm not that keen on maths, but I'll do like maybe a first year subject. And what ended up happening was I enjoyed my maths subjects much more than my chemistry subjects. And so I finished my chem degree and decided to do a maths degree. Work out how I can change my slide. Yeah, so ended up in this maths degree, really enjoyed it. I had some amazing lecturers. So in particular, one lecturer, Lewis Mitchell, taught this amazing course on dynamical systems, and I became fascinated with like chaos theory and uncertainty quantification and fractals, and I thought this was really cool. So at the end of my maths degree, I decided to do a master's in mathematics, in applied mathematics with Lewis Mitchell and some other really awesome lecturers in the school. So John McLean and Sanjeeva Balasuriya. And these lecturers ended up becoming really important mentors. They kind of, I think I had a lot of imposter syndrome about having come from more of a science background, not really being interested in mathematics, not having done specialist maths in school. So I never saw myself as a mathematics person. And I think them being my mentors really helped me kind of shed that vision of myself as being incompetent at maths, and just kind of be open to like my fascination rather than how terrified I was at failing at this subject. Yeah, so I ended up doing my master's in kind of an area of climate modeling, but it was kind of designing algorithms based on chaos theory, but also based on Bayesian statistics for kind of trying to make predictions about systems like the climate and the ocean and the atmosphere more accurate when those systems were really close to tipping points. So really loved my project, got to speak at conferences, found the whole experience really exciting. But when I finished my master's, I thought, I think I'm ready to kind of try working, because I just felt interested about what I could apply, what I'd learned to in the working world. And I think when you've only done, like I'd worked casually, but I hadn't really worked in a full-time job before. And so I was just curious about what it was like. But this was actually a really hard period for me. I tried a whole lot of different jobs and didn't really, kind of like what Sarah was talking about, just felt like a cog in the machine. So I initially worked as a cybersecurity consultant, and then I worked as an energy trader for an energy consultancy. So two quite different areas. My path was quite convoluted, all in kind of data related areas, but I just didn't feel they were kind of fully utilizing the skills I'd gained in my master's. So after all of this, as I said, I'd worked as a cybersecurity consultant, kind of dropped that, moved into energy consultancy, dropped that. And so I kind of felt like a bit of a failure because I couldn't stick to these things. And I think there's this whole narrative of kind of sticking it out, and I felt like I was failing in that respect. But then this job opportunity came up at AIMS, and it was advertised for someone with a PhD or someone with a master's and industry experience. And I was very reticent to apply because I thought my industry experience is so patchy. Like, I worked as a cybersecurity consultant and an energy consultant, and it all seems very unconnected. But in my application, I kind of talked about data science and how my mathematics degree was helping me understand data in these two very different situations. And that got me the job. And best decision I've ever made. Very similar area to the area Sarah was talking about. We've actually collaborated. But yeah, now I'm working for the Australian Institute of Marine Science as I guess, quantitative decision scientist is the best way to describe my role. So it's basically using data science, optimization, operations research to try and understand the best ways to approach restoration and conservation on the Great Barrier Reef. So I get to use a whole range of tools, a whole range of programming languages. We build kind of decision support tools for key stakeholders on the reef. So for example, people making policy, just anyone who has a stake in the reef. So the tourist industry, government, and I think just the relevance and the importance of that, even though I'm just a tiny part of this research, there's so many people involved, that's so motivating. And it kind of goes back to me looking at those National Geographic covers and thinking like, wow, science has such an impact on the world. And so I feel like I'm finally part of that. Yeah, so that's my current role. And it's a really cool role because I also get to work with people from a lot of different disciplines. So marine biologists, oceanographers, other mathematicians, yeah, just people from a whole range of areas, even social scientists, to understand the social impacts of environmental change on the reef. So that's so cool because it's such a learning experience. Particularly, for example, I work with a software engineer, and I've learnt my coding has become exponentially better just from working with them. So I think, yeah, just the collaborations I've been open to have been so good. So I guess I'll finish with a little bit of what I think is really working with equity and diversity in data science and what needs to be done. So I think, as a lot of people have commented on, grassroots organizations like the Women in Data Science Network, and there's so many little groups that you can become part of now. And I think these are like so important. Like we underestimate how important these are. I think just in terms of getting that feeling of not being alone and being part of a community and being able to find mentors as well. Like I've been lucky to kind of accidentally come across mentors through like my master's supervisors, and I have a lot of mentors through my work now. But yeah, I think sometimes you can feel it's difficult to find a mentor, and these groups are so important for that. More non-traditional pathways to STEM, I think, like myself, for example, I didn't come from a background where I was like, oh, I love math. I came from totally different perspective and had that idea changed through really good lecturers and really good teachers. And so I think these new kind of like fast track math programs in unis and that kind of thing are so important, because you can be halfway through a degree and be like, oh, I actually want to study maths. And it doesn't matter if you don't have the background, you can still do the work to get into an area you want to be in. And I think that's really important for encouraging diversity in data science, because it doesn't matter if you've been discouraged earlier on. Like, it's a shame that you've been discouraged earlier on, but it's not going to be a roadblock. And also that there's a wide range of platforms to exchange stories. So panels like these, podcasts, all these kind of like informal mediums for exchanging stories are so important, because I think it can be overwhelming looking at other people's LinkedIn profiles and thinking, how am I going to get there? But I think through stories, you realize that, as we've all commented on, a lot of people enter data science through a totally non-linear track. I'll just finish with some things that I think need to be done. And this isn't supposed to be an attack on any particular organization or anything else. This is just general things that I've noticed, is more diverse interview panels and more transparency in hiring practices and disaggregated data, disaggregated stats for industries and government. I think you might have noticed that a lot of workplaces will post about International Women's Day and that kind of thing, but it's hard to know if they're actually following that up with good policies in their workplaces. So I think transparency is a huge part of that. And also in research, particularly better recognition of the triage faced by women in postdoctoral work. So I know a lot of postdocs, and I think there's a lot of issues around trying to balance like family life and that kind of thing with research and the kind of traditional culture of research. I think that's changing, but it's still a massive challenge. Yeah, that's all about me. Thank you so much for this opportunity.